All right. Thank you so much for being here. I apologize for the noise. We will be using microphones, but if for any reason you can't hear us, just let us know. Ryan Panders, our amazing audio engineer for the day, going to help us with that. But good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the third installment of our Creative Inquiry series featuring the incredible Dr. Suzanne Kite. While the brevity of this bio will by no means do her justice, I do want to give everyone a sense of the true gift that is her time and presence with us today. Dr. Kite is an award-winning Broadway Lakota performance artist, visual artist, composer, and academic, known for her sound and video performance with her machine learning hair braid interface. Kite's groundbreaking scholarship and practice explore contemporary Lakota ontology through research, creation, computational media, and performance. Kite often works in collaboration, especially with family and community members. Kite holds a BFA from Cal Arts in music composition, an MFA from Bard College's Milton Avery Graduate School, and a PhD from Concordia University. Her work has been featured in numerous publications and exhibitions, the most recent of which includes this year's 81st Whitney Biennial. This is the first time we've ever hosted this event with an in-person component, so I'm really excited to see many of you here in Cabell Library, as well as out there in the Zoomiverse. Thank you for being here. Being able to offer this talk as a hybrid event was made possible by the financial support from our partners, the Department of Kinetic Imaging, the Humanities Research Center, and the Media, Art, and Text program, as well as a grant from the VCU Foundation. This event would also not have been possible without the love, labor, and support from VCU libraries, especially our amazing events manager, Ryan Pander, and our awesome team at the workshop, especially our student staff who will be assisting with today's documentation. And also, I usually forget to introduce myself. I am Oscar Keys. I'm the multimedia teaching and learning librarian here at VCU Libraries, which is a fancy way of saying that I help students and faculty looking to use creative technologies in their studies, teaching, and research through our resources downstairs in the workshop. For those of you attending Creative Inquiries for the first time, this speaker series aims to little critical friction to these sleek ideas about innovative technologies by providing a platform to discuss the complexities of living in an increasingly technological world. Featuring the expertise of researchers who make and makers who research, these speakers do not approach technology as an answer, but rather as a question. How does technology reflect the issues, inequities, and injustices in our society, and what is there to be done about it? To give a quick sense of today's talk, we will first hear from Dr. Kite, and then there'll be a Q&A session moderated by Shanae Michael Wayne Holloway from the Department of Kinetic Imaging and Dr. Jennifer Ree from the Department of English and also director of the AI Futures Lab through the HRC. So if you have any questions, please hold them until the end. We will have a microphone for asking for those questions for accessibility purposes, so wait until we run that to you. I think it'll most likely be me. We encourage you to stay afterwards. There will be snacks and beverages following the talk to encourage people to connect, mingle, and discuss the talk afterwards. And finally, given the topic of Dr. Kite's talk, the moderators and I felt it was appropriate to give a land acknowledgement in conjunction with today's event, especially given that the Commonwealth of Virginia was one of the first points of contact between the Indigenous peoples and European settlers. We acknowledge the presence of the Powhatan chiefdom and the Monacan Nation and the land on which this university stands. Additionally, today Virginia is home to 11 state-recognized tribes, 7 of which are also federally recognized. While these types of statements are inherently never enough to do the ongoing systems of settler colonization, as an educational institution, we thought at the very least we could do was raise awareness by acknowledging that the land we're standing on right now is Indigenous land, past, present, and future. But on that topic of Indigenous futures, I will now hand it off to the expert, Dr. Suzanne.
Wow, a talk in person, what fun. Usually I do these in bed with like a fake background behind me, like I'm in an office, but actually I'm in the bed and I'm holding the cat off screen. I'll start, I'll have a clicker. Nice. I'll start by saying, I'll pitch watch today, Suzanne Karamachi api kushto, or taki api kigloni hawi. Los Angeles etaha, nalaham kaniak elwatie, inawakin alita kaida chiapi, na dawekin Dennis kaida chiapi, inawakin Cynthia Friedman at chiapi, na dawekin Matt Svigals at chiapi, urchikaljin meth teth, na Mildred Ferrier Wachakiapi Kaka Bill Stover or Machpia Naji na Edwin Spiegel Wachakiapi Ogwala Himacha Chanta Iwashte Nape Usable relatives. I shake your hands with a happy heart. Here we are, Turtle Island. And then here is where a lot of my folks live. Specifically in this little corner of South Dakota, specifically around Kyle on Pine Ridge Reservation. So with this, to me, this is a map of places that I do research, places that I return to, places that I feel very specifically that my research is grounded in. Even more specifically, this area next to Kyle Dam and No Flesh Creek around my great-grandmother Evelyn Stover's home. And this is where I consider where our family, our Stover Tioshpe, kind of centers ourselves. And to be even more specific, when I'm thinking about where my knowledge comes from, it comes very specifically, this is just like a fraction of my family tree, of course, but really coming to me in collaboration with my traditional brother and cousin Corey Stover, and all of these people in our family who passed down their knowledge all the way to Elizabeth Ironroad and her great uncle William Black Thunder. So I want to start just by showing an artwork. This artwork lives and breathes while I sleep. Each day I sent embroidery for geometric designs, which were translated from my sleep, my hamlet into the gallery. And these patterns draw from traditional Lakota art making, where many designs and forms of beadwork use our Lakota visual language to communicate narratives and visions, which are sometimes first encountered in our dreams. I utilize this very specific design methodology based on Lakota scholar and designer Sadie Redwing's scholarship. This work imagines the embroidery machine as a machine being, transforming knowledge from the dream world into the visual language of dreams and corresponding those designs with Lakota words. And of course, some dreams are extremely deep and meaningful, and some are not. This one is me and my mentor, Jason Edward Lewis, and I running around in circles in a parking garage. This was like the week I was submitting my dissertation. I had this dream. Really spot on. Then this was at the Center for Arts Research and Alliances in New York City. Each dream was embroidered onto the textile, and in turn, a series of performers realized these dreams as scores into music. And this is me performing one of those scores. So in 2015, at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, I met Tuscarora artist and academic Jolene Ricard, who used the term cosmology-scape. So to me, I've come to understand Lakota ethics through this concept of cosmology-scapes, and this term encapsulates the intricate web of interactions within, between, and through cosmos and the land, between humans, the earth, and the universe itself, all interweaving to form a single sphere of our human perception. It's a way of seeing the sky world and the earth world as one, a perspective that has been transformative for my own thinking. So this comprehensive web of interaction informs and shapes Lakota ontologies, epistemologies, and methodologies of creation. So to go backwards a little bit to around 2014, I created what sometimes I call the Oglala interface, which was made for wearing microcontrollers on the body so I could wirelessly control and affect audio software and video software during performance. And I first used this in a piece, People You Must Look at Me, which was a 15-minute performance using the interface to control audio and video live. And let's see, back then it was really hard to do this, much easier now. but I had very good collaborators, such as James Hurwitz, who first soldered all of this together and showed me how to use open source software. And this was my first pull into wearable electronics. And I before I had access to this interface, I was obsessed with the idea that one could be in circular relationship with the computer. I grew up as a violinist, classical violinist, and I played klezmer violin for a while, and I felt like I could not, in kind of experimental composition or traditional composition or even kind of just regular classical violin playing, I generally could not access this feeling of bodily dissolution, disassociation that I associate with some violin performances. Sometimes when you're performing, you fully disappear into the music and into the creation of something new. And I needed to create a system by which I could explore that. But I was very done with playing classical violin at this point. So over the years, this kind of transformed into other types of interfaces, such as the hair-brain interface. But all of these required kind of a longer engagement with different fields, such as computational media, eventually artificial intelligence ethics, like wearable human-computer interaction, and indigenous contemporary art, Lakota philosophy. So, but in investigating the intersections between these, it became clear to me that the technology of embodied performance, not necessarily the technology of technology, but embodied performance, is an essential aspect for the creation of new Lakota knowledge. And it's through the technology of embodied performance that Lakota epistemology functions. It's the performance of relation between the body and the cosmos. So the first piece that I made machine learning artwork for was called Listener. Kind of at the end of 2017, 2018, I started work on this piece after being heavily influenced and encouraged by the artist Letitia Sonami, who was using the system Wekinator to develop a new instrument of her own along with Max MSP. And it became very integral to me to engage with machine learning because it freed me from the one-to-one trap that a lot of MIDI control, OSC control kind of, it's so automatic when you use MIDI controllers that you really, in the end, I always felt like I was just turning a knob or pressing a button. So I started to think about what it meant as a Lakota person to be using machine learning and how I could explore Lakota ethics for establishing and maintaining relations with non-human beings, such as technologies, and how could that provide an alternative framework for considering ethics in AI. So Lakota ethics are created, to me, by the cosmology scape. It's this web of human to human, human to non-human, non-human to non-human relationships in a place. So always in a place where place includes the land and the cosmos and everything in between. So to me, Lakota knowledge is located in the stories and teachings of elders, of family members, and ceremony and songs that are passed in a good way. In the slow listening process. So Lakota knowledge is not necessarily for all people at all times. Sometimes it's not even for me at all times. But I can turn to my Lakota family for general questions about Lakota philosophy and for specific questions about building, forming, maintaining relationships with non-humans. So Lakota cosmologies are the center of this theoretical framework, and they're shared to me by a lot through the stories, histories, teachings, and practices of my late grandfather, Makia Najin, and they provide to me the context to generate an ethics relating humans to the world and to the land and other beings. So when Lakota people use this kind of colloquial term, good way, it can have many meanings. Maybe it's like choices one makes in the path of life, attitudes towards others during conflict, protocols which grow and maintain healthy relationships. And protocols, it comes up in my work and my colleagues' work a lot. Protocols have many purposes. Yes, they could be computational protocols, but one of these protocols uses is to maintain a core sense of responsibility between individuals and community during important decision-making processes, from ceremony to politics to family events. So there are a lot of concepts that influence this on an academic level, non-human ontologies, ideas of interiority, the ontology of stones in particular. And this terminology for this research comes through various interpretations of scholars who are not native, but I feel their terminology in English is helpful to explore these topics regardless. Scholars like Felipe Descola, Eduardo Viveras de Castro, Graham Harvey, David Posthumus. And I found this terminology very useful and their conceptual formulations productive, especially the word non-humans and interiority. So David Posthumus describes interiority as, quote, the extension of personhood. This is a quote from him. Depending on the context, animals, spirits, ghosts, rocks, trees, meteorological phenomena, medicine bundles, regalia, weapons, and other objects were seen as persons or subjectivities, selves with souls. The potential for personhood was ever present. So to me, this idea of interiority and the potential for personhood are very key to my exploration, especially of stones and objects that are stones or made from the earth and then transformed into technologies. So applying the Lakota ontology to the creation of new technologies such as computers, instruments, machine learning systems extends this potential for personhood, extends the potential for agency and interpersonal relationships between humans and non-humans. So in my practice, I simply choose to extend the potential for personhood to computers. What are computers if not melted stones mined from the earth from a very specific location within a very specific territory that already contains relationships between humans and non-human beings? So to go backwards to my the first talk I did about this in, I think, 2018 or 2019, I started to talk about this idea of non-human futures. So very specifically, I wanted to address the idea that relationships between humans and technology and artificial intelligence are very informed by humans being already surrounded by objects which are not understood to be even intelligent or alive and seen unworthy of relations. But how can humanity create a future with relationships between technology or AI and humans without an ethical, ontological orientation with which we understand who is our relation and who is not? I always include this quote in my presentations. This is Dakota scholar Vine Deloria Jr., and he writes, respect involves two attitudes. One attitude is the acceptance of self-discipline by humans and their communities to act responsibly towards other forms of life. The other attitude is to seek to establish communications and covenants with other forms of life on a mutually agreeable basis. So this idea of an ontology that leads to the colonial capitalist power and Western accumulation of wealth, I see it as the end logic of any ontology which sees any entity as unworthy of relations. So it's not, to me, a question of if machines deserve to be entities, rather a question of which ontologies do we choose to shape our world, and whether these ontologies support an ethics which leads to slavery. So another quote I always include is Dylan Rainforth's, from Dylan Rainforth's How Aborigines Invented the Idea of Object-Oriented Ontology. And Rainforth says, object mastery and territorial possession are demonstrated part and parcel of the processes of genocide. So to me, that the mastery and force are the actions of these of ontologies. When this logic is exploded over entire continents, every entity is possessed along with it. No entity can escape under an ontology which can enslave even a single object. Ontologies gain their ethics from a contextualization, relationships and communications within and between cosmologies, mythologies, and locations. If you want to read more about this, this is the paper we published long time ago now, all the way back in 2018, and then later we published this paper, position paper on indigenous protocols and artificial intelligence. But I want to talk about one piece, artwork called Telling Rock, or Ia, and so we considered this work to be made of song, power, sound, processors, machine learning decisions, handmade circuitry, gold, silver, copper, aluminum, silicon, fiberglass. And this was commissioned by the Bemis Center in the Sensory Entanglements Project. And it's a large acrylic dome that hangs from the ceiling, encapsulating handmade circuits. And these circuits, when sensors are swung, twisted, shaken, or brushed, and within these hair braids hanging down, it affects the audio heard in the gallery. A voice reciting a song in Lakota, dropping in and out of audibility, radio jumping around a dial, voices almost perceivable. EIA software listens to those audio changes and uses machine learning to make decisions about how and when to change this constellation of lights. So this piece was came about after a conversation with my grandfather, Martia Najin, who wanted me to make an artwork based on his vision. He had a vision of a man and woman with long flowing hair full of stars. And I took this as a challenge to try to make something that was like legible to my elder. And to me, this spoke directly to the key components of indigenous protocols and systems of knowledge of creation that are ultimately guide us in our desire to know how things are done in a good way. Because Lakota knowledge is not static. Protocols change, decision-making shifts, names change, because in practice, our decisions have an effect on the world and must be continually made and changed in a network of relations. So this affects our decisions, and of course, then our technologies. And so we have to identify what stakeholders in what is being made and how it's being used, because in indigenous communities, stakeholders are identified as our extended circle of relations, while stakeholders in technology companies are identified as the board of directors, shareholders, employees, consumers. It's necessary to identify how all of these, both human and non-human, are affected by what we make and take responsibility for who it affects. So this is a stone that I know, and this is our family sweat lodge, long time ago now, probably like 2014. And this conversation and the creation of this artwork led me to write this paper, How to Build Anything Ethically, where AI is in the center of these streams of protocol, but can be switched out for anything. There are streams of protocol in everything we make, whether we identify them or not. But if I zoom in specifically on, let's say, those physical computing device, a stream of consultation, or a stream of protocol might be consultation, identifying stakeholders, raw materials, compensating, construction, running the program, transformation, welcoming, and death cycle. And a lot of these we don't actually spend a lot of time thinking about, especially death cycle. What happens to the thing we make after we make it? Where does it go? What happens to it? Similarly, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about transformation. And transformation to me is looking at what the original materials are and what happens when they are changed, when they allow themselves to be changed to become something else. And I think specifically about things like electric power. If I've got a raw cable exposed and a noise set, and I'm making music with it, am I hearing that electric cable, or am I hearing the hydroelectric power source? Am I listening to the water? So this paper was very, very important. This whole protocol research strain was very important because it drove us to where we are now, which is the Abundant Intelligences Research Program. And when we say abundant intelligences, we're talking about abundance instead of artificial intelligence. We're saying prioritizing regeneration, reciprocity, and generosity towards sustaining each other through what we create, even with AI. Very proud of this project, especially because we were able to convince science funders to let us do things like imagine stuff, to let us do things like train. So not only do we have imaginaries such as speculative design and art making, but we have investigations into methodology, the creation of AI, of course, prototyping, and most importantly, training research assistants, postdocs, and community members in order to build the capacity to engage with AI. These are probably just some of our partners now. We had 49 co-applicants, and feel very good about this. So my role right now at Bard College is very specifically as director of the Wahamle Sa'a, or Dreamer Center or Lab for Indigenous AI. And my focus is on doing research creation alongside with and influencing or being influenced by the artificial intelligence. So to me, our activities are focused around Lakota semiotics, which I'll talk a little bit more about, song-making practices, public communication through artworks, developing AI tools to collaborate with human dreamers, both sleep and waking, publishing about the application of Indigenous research creation methodologies. So a lot of this stuff is focused on capacity building, on methodology building, on experimentation. And I hope that that shows our funders and our future funders and our community members that artwork is essential in the exploration and creation of new things. So hopefully we'll do all of this fun stuff. We have, in this grant, we are thankfully encouraged to have community anchors and community partners. And we also have the ability to collaborate extremely cross-disciplinarily. So AI developers, architects, neuroscientists, linguists, designers, knowledge keepers, working with EEG and cultural practices, cognitive science, all towards developing kind of more complex explorations of AI through Lakota knowledge. So to me, my questions remain like, what is the connection between materials from the earth formed into sculpture and materials from our dreams, which are formed into song? How does Lakota philosophy see the human body in relation to the creation of new knowledge? So I want to build on this previous research on how Lakota ontologies prepare us for making new relationships and covenants with non-human beings, such as possibly AI. And to me, it's like an endless argument probably, that Indigenous research creation methodologies prepare us to approach AI, not only from a material perspective, such as methods for listening with and through stones, but from the perspective of knowledge received by Lakota people through a hambla, through dreams or visions. To be really specific, I'm very proud of my research creation methodology list that I developed during my dissertation research. And so this is a list of Indigenous protocols and methodologies that I experienced during interviews. I did some of these things too, but these were things that other people did that I was witness to. This is obviously a non-exhaustive list, and it's designed to broaden the scope of Indigenous research creation methodology, setting the stage for future collaborative research projects and creation of artwork. So for AI researchers, this list serves as a resource to enhance the understanding of knowledge circulation within Indigenous communities, and to see how forms of knowledge are created that have nothing to do with the data set. Adopting Lakota-specific methodologies into our computational tools opens this possibility for developing Lakota AI. So hopefully we want to transcend notions of artificiality, and especially transcend notions of a Western intelligence, which I see as total myth. It's like there's no such thing as artificial in this world, and my community doesn't seem to prioritize intelligence as the marker of what makes someone worthy of caring for. So these methods assert that Lakota knowledge can be dreamt, made, interpreted, worn, all through the body, and always in connection with body, spirit, land, and cosmos. I want to show a few of the graphics in relation to this work. These were developed by myself and Bobby Jo Smith. Twisting vortex, ladder, circling, dome framework, star stones, and star stones, dome framework. So this is my version of a Capemni, a twisting vortex. And so I imagine this graphic in the center is the act of creation, is the artwork, the body, the person. And on one side of the twisting vortex is a symbol for a stone, on the other side a symbol for a star. The lightning strikes shapes represent the power of transformation. We've got a star representing the cosmos, unseen knowledge of the spirit, a stone, an arrangement of two symbols for mountain, representing the seen and physical realm. And these cones represent Capemni, the twisting vortex. So to me, it's the idea that each decision that is made transforms energy from one world to the next. Most importantly, through Lakota ontology, I consider much of non-human ontologies and epistemologies outside of human knowability altogether, but still prioritized. So this is the dome framework, which points, these are like points of intersection between the physical and non-physical world when an artist creates art or someone creates anything. It's the interconnectedness of decisions and ethics, which is part of the art making process. So here in the center is this artwork, or an artwork, a computer, a speech, a song, a machine learning system, a painting, a beaded medallion, a quillwork pouch, always made in collaboration with humans and non-humans, seen and unseen. This is, these diamonds with the stars in them are nodes in these spheres, representing points of protocol such as listening, hearing, exchange, reciprocity, acknowledgement, gifting, feasting, honoring the knowable and unknowable, all surrounding and influencing the unfolding artwork in the center. So to me, each point of protocol that the artist participates in has an effect on the artwork. Anishinaabe artist and scholar Scott Benison-Avandan told me, quote, "I consider dreaming the most important technology we have because it weaves together one day to another day, one idea to another idea to another idea." So to me, dreaming is one of these protocols that connects the physical and spiritual world in the creation of anything. Finally, to me, each act of protocol in the physical world is reflected in the spirit world. So in this figure, these are nodes of protocol, nodes of decision-making and methodology as seen as interactions between humans and non-humans, affecting each other and others in infinite ways. The offering of tobacco may seem irrelevant to building a computer, but the chain of reaction of reciprocity reverberates into an unseen world. So these graphics help me pose questions such as, when we make new knowledge, who are our collaborators? Do we communicate with and through our technologies to the spirit world? Does all of time and space conspire for our spirits to see a star or meet a stone? When are we listening to non-humans? So when I approach research creation projects with dreams, my research questions change. If creation of physical artworks are the result of collaborations with beings with potential interiority on the earth, is the creation of work from dreams a similar collaboration? How can Lakota methods help us engage with the humble dreams in a good way? What do my relatives, humans and non-humans, want to communicate about the movement of knowledge through dreams? Yeah, I just want to offer a few perspectives from other creators. So Jackson Two Bear, Dr. Jackson Two Bears is Ganyagahaga, Haudenosaunee from Six Nations and Tyendinaga. Two Bears suggested that the process of working with dreams or visions requires great slowness. He says to me, the approach to that in terms of what we were just talking about, dreams, spatial philosophy, takes patience. I've been doing this too, paying attention to my dreams and things that happen and how those things interconnect with the things I'm thinking about, because they help us get outside the sensory experience of this version of reality and help us think about things in that sense, not making artwork necessarily for human consumption. I love this quote because it points to for me, the ways in which dreaming contributes to artwork, whether accessed as like a lightning strike or a slow interpretation. It's a method for collaborating with the non-human world. Nehia, Cree performance artist Archie Pachawas related a similar set of protocols for honoring non-humans and ancestors involved in the process of creating art. Pachawas says, I always get my ideas from the ancestors. They're not my ideas. I'm just the lightning rod of the receptor. These ideas come to me. In a perfect world, I would run outside, I would put down tobacco, I would give thanks. In a practical sense, oftentimes I just get so excited about the idea, I forget about protocol and just start making stuff. But there's always a point in the process where I go, oh, hang on a second here. The forms must be obeyed and the protocols should be observed. For Shikangu, Lakota artist and scholar, and my cousin Clementine Bordeaux, offering tobacco represents reciprocity in this process. Clementine says, I'm not just going to take to have an abundance. I'm taking and I'm giving, I'm creating, and it's beneficial for everybody and everything. There's this visceral connection and not just a theoretical connection. So I'm going to show a few artworks that really specifically talk about this. This is the first artwork I made with a dream. These are 3 dreams that I had. I'm going to show you a little clip of one of them that's particularly strange. This is a more recent work. This is like a hide-based work with these symbols that I'll talk about in a second. And this was like a very auditory dream that I then broke up into 4 parts and created these hide works. These works are part of, to me, a dream to design methodology, where I understand that not all dreams are. Last year I spoke to an elder of mine, and he told me, I asked him about dreams and how they were important, and he told me they're not important at all. They're so boring. And I was like, oh, you're just trolling me a little bit. But some dreams are important, some are not. But I'm really interested in kind of working through my own dreams as starting with the place that they are super important and that they do deserve to be listened to, and then kind of developing filters from there. So this is a recent collaboration with Silk Road Ensemble, scored for them. The text disappeared over here, and kind of giving instructions. And these are all dreams that they had that are arranged. So I want to talk really specifically about the beginning of using this shape kit. This is my cousin Corey Stover using the Lakota shape kit, which is developed by Sadie Redwing. And here he's telling the story of my great-great-great-great-grandmother Iron Road escaping from the Wounded Knee Massacre. And this is a frame from the film that we made where she's traveling from camp to camp with Bigfoot's group, and they pass through the winter storm, they pass through the fight, and she escapes with 3 other people, and eventually finds the Iron Road. She finds the railroad, and eventually makes it back to rosebud to safety. And this was the first stone sculpture I made based on that. We rearranged it into a kind of more traditional Lakota form. But this, I started to think about the shape kit as extremely flexible. So developing a collaborative composition process for a piece that would eventually be called Logliglia, which means shapes or geometries, Tunkashi Lachecchiello, which is the name of my collaborator's piece within my piece. And to me, this helped me develop a method. I interviewed my relative Santee Witt, who's a composer, peyote roadman, and traditional singer, and came to understand that his commitment and passion for composing really reveals his depth of relationship with the creator and how he understands that song comes through him. So that year, I won a commission with Third Coast Percussion Ensemble, but I couldn't imagine doing such an important show in Chicago without a collaborator from the community, and reached out to Witt to see if he wanted to try my experimental composition method. So I co-composed with the ensemble by having them use the shape kit to describe their personal dreams, which I unified into one score, and Witt contributed a composition of his own, which is the center of that work. And so these are the Third Coast Percussion Ensemble members' dreams. As you can see, they look a lot different than the way Corey composes dreams. And this became the final score. So it's the performance realized by the ensemble, and it's comes in a max communal dreaming and visioning methodology. The score is made of shapes from the Lakota shape kit. It's meant to be chiastic, meaning the structure of the piece is mirrored and cocoons the central event on the timeline, which is a really preferred format for my compositions. And this mirror structure is then performed by the percussionists. So Witt's composition in the center, Tunkashi Lachecchiello, is performed, and then the percussionists resume, realizing the score backwards out from the design. So I'll play a little bit of this. Louder. So, just to talk about some other aspects of this project. So I on the technical side, use a lot of Touch Designer and lots of other programs and what I make. And so that's something I'm still pursuing, live performance. And then coming up in June, I have the collaboration with Creative Time, which is a big public artwork with myself and the Afrofuturist Alicia B. Wormsley, who works from Pittsburgh. And together we're developing a way to deepen our exploration of this workshop we started doing in 2020 called Black and Indigenous Dreaming Workshop, where it kind of started as, hosting and spending very slow time with other Black and Indigenous people who engage with dream work. But now we're developing a system where people can engage with our dream practices, their own dream practices, and then see how we can develop the resultant dream designs in public arts, public sculptures that encourage rest. And, my experience, many people's experiences in New York City, it's a place that really discourages rest and actually criminalizes rest for many people. So that's kind of our approach to that. So when I think about dreams as the material of making artwork, I like to ask people, what is your definition of a dream? What is the biggest dream you've ever had? Have you ever used dreams in your practice? What was the last non-human being you communicated with, physical or non-physical? And for Lakota people, the answer is a very long engagement with Lakota geometries. So up here on the right side, we have a classic example of Lakota geometric work on this pag. Often a Lakota geometry is done by women or people who do women's work. My family members who are Two-Spirit do this work too. People who are not Two-Spirit do this work. But it is a form that is often associated with women. And the bottom here, this is kind of more traditionally considered men's work, figural, men doing battle. What's really interesting is these designs seem to be associated with dreams or visions. So when I interviewed my Aunt Becky Redbow, I asked her how she got the design for the bag we were talking about. She's like, oh, no, I just put out tobacco and I prayed for the design and I went to sleep. And in the morning I woke up with it. It's as simple as that. What's really interesting to some other examples here, this example on the far left is really cool because it's thought to be a Two-Spirit design. Specifically, it's a pipe bag and it's got a combination of geometric and kind of the figural. So we've got a figure that's maybe perhaps this double woman who's seen as a mythological figure who brings and delivers artworks and the ability to do artwork to women. And you can see there's dragonflies on either side. And it's a great example. And here in the center is this is taken from Sadie Redwing's master's thesis, where these designs have very clear and direct meaning. Each symbol is probably like a proto-language, where each of these designs can be infinitely reconfigured into meaning. And I think that it's very interesting to me how such a limited vocabulary can create sort of like an infinite field of meaning and creation in this sort of semiotic way. So to me, engaging with this language is a way to explore dreams and visions. And because this language does a really good job of talking about qualities of the dream, transformation within the dream, and beings in the dream, really in a very Lakota way. Not, this language very clearly is full of nouns, but it, doesn't actually do noun very well. There's only a few nouns. But what it does do is describe change and transformation. So these are all the dreams I had over like a 3-month period. And every morning I would write my dream down, I'd translate it into Lakota, and then I would translate it into this design language as a way to try to think about how I could get my brain to start dreaming in the language itself, which is my goal. And then these ended up, these are what I sent every day to the gallery in the first piece I showed to be embroidered on the fabric. So I'll kind of wrap up by saying that my engagement with this is hopefully very long-term, and I see artificial intelligence as can be very boring to me at this point. The conversations around it are often trying to push me to constantly do critical work, to think critically about what bad actors at large companies and in government are doing to try to further oppress people who are already oppressed by using a brand new tool on the market. And of course, I do a lot of critical work in that field, doing criticism. But I want to constantly ask myself how I can do generative work in that field, and say that my collaborators I've just hired a postdoc who will be taking EEG and using Touch Designer and custom software to try to do dreaming methodologies and then create new geometries, how that can be a way to engage with AI as helper, as what Scott Benison Abandon refers to in his essay, like SCABE, where there is with relationships with non-human beings that are based on covenants. In taking Bindaloria's term, the covenants are the way that we create and maintain reciprocal relationships with non-human beings on a nation-to-nation basis. So I want to continually work through the possibilities of AI, but maybe go back towards what people would call dumb AI or shallow AI or small data sets. Because first of all, when I work with Swekinator small data sets, I know the whole data set. I made the whole data set myself. And when I work with tools like natural language processing, it can't make these. This is what it doesn't do. It does not create meaning. And same thing with the other big funded part of AI right now, which is again, general adversarial networks. It can't do this necessarily. I mean, you can make it do this, but it's not making meaning. It's not moving knowledge into the world in a good way. So I'm gonna, if you wanna, this is from liminaldreaming.com. I love this exercise. So if you want to try to get your dream to stick in the morning, I recommend this process. It's on liminaldreaming.org or .com, where I stole it from. And I'll just end with this quote. I asked my grandfather before he passed, should I be scared of the future? Is the future dangerous? Is knowing the future dangerous? And he said, spirits and ancestors are just there on the other side trying to help. And so I think it's our responsibility to listen to that. So, Ropila.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for all of that. There's so much to unpack and so much richness there and so many different ways to move through this. And maybe in reflection of that, I am wondering maybe if we can talk about a couple of words that you were using, because so much of your lecture was a part of how we can redefine those words in the face of tradition and also history and family, and also sort of a landscape way of looking at different connections. One of the words you kept using was reciprocity. And I was wondering maybe if we can start there, but to, maybe just talk about that word, what it means on like a very kind of simple level. But maybe one of my questions was, does reciprocity and circularity have something to do with one another, or if those are different shades or not a part of the same world at all? Reciprocity, circularity. Yeah. Or maybe even collaboration fits in that kind of Venn diagram. Just thinking about the flow of this conversation moving forward. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, sure. Reciprocity is, I think it's probably the most important word because it takes ideas like responsibility and makes them functional. Reciprocity is measurable. Responsibility maybe a little less so. circularity. Oh, sure. I haven't thought about that. I like spiral as kind of more because it doesn't represent it, to me. Spiral design, spiral decision making, and like involves iteration and change. Where you can do the same thing over and over, and there is an exchange between things on a circular basis, but maybe it can shift. Now, was a third word?
I think collaboration.
Collaboration, yeah. And reciprocity and collaboration are different because I think one thing that comes up a lot in the conversations about AI and art is like empathy, like art that creates empathy. And I really don't believe in that. I don't think empathy is real enough for me. Reciprocity is, like, it involves action. And I think, to me, collaboration is means different things to different people. Like, being a good collaborator is definitely based on personal decision. But when you're being reciprocal in community, that means that you have to give back more than you've taken. And I even think about like super traditional perspectives on this, like Ella Deloria's book Water Lily. There's a quote in there. We're talking about like traditional life, Dakota life, where if somebody gave you one horse out of the kindness of their heart, you had to work really hard to give them 50 back. And not in like it's not altruism. That's not what's going on. It's economy, because you know that everyone will benefit by you giving way more back. And also it's a point of pride, and honor to do that.
So yeah, thank you for that talk. That was so rich and so rich. And one of the things I was thinking about, your talk was about so much more than AI, right? And in many ways, I appreciate that, because it kind of right sizes AI in a certain way, right? But I'm going to talk a little bit, ask you a question about AI, relative to your talk. I think a lot about AI and speed, and in particular slowness, right? And another word that seemed to kind of extend throughout your talk is slowness. So you talked about a slow listening process. You talked about even the embodied performance as a kind of technology spoke to me of a very specific temporal scale, right? That is not the scale of kind of speed and AI, right? And so I wondered if you could say, and even the protocol stream, right, from your work on how to build anything ethically, right? There was a kind of slowness to the process that's required to build ethically, right? Which I really appreciated. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the temporal scale. If it's not slowness, maybe there are other temporalities that really emerge from or structure your work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to take responsibility for not being good at doing slowness, because anybody who knows me knows I work like crazy a lot, too much. So trying to learn how to be slower. But also, like, I think the funding models which we are under pressure from require extreme speed. Like, we have 6 years, maybe 5 years now to finish this abundant intelligence grant. I mean, that means we have to solve all of these problems and spend all this money, like tomorrow. And that's not the speed you're going to get a really ethical process. That's not how it works. But I think, on the more conceptual level, when I think about, I actually realized I didn't have these images in my slides, but I've been making sculptures where one side of the room has like deep space objects, like stars, in the diagram, like a traditional like Lakota style on hides. And on the other side of the room, I've got like the USGS data for the associated volcanic object to the associated star object. Because in Lakota cosmology, there's a connection between those places and the places of the stars, and where you go to do the religion is based on when those stars align with those volcanic objects. And so there's a real intense force by which I can imagine we used to move around the earth and go to those places and do circularity, do some circles, and keep the world structured. I think those time structures, and I love the idea also that sometimes we wouldn't make it to those places, right? Well, the weather wasn't good, political stuff going on, and so sometimes you don't make it that year, and that's okay. But that kind of slow movement through the world is one level, and then the other level that I was obsessed with for a long time was the slowness of the formation of stones. And the reality that I had a elder, John Doing Gosen Center, who also works in geology. He's like, these stones are flowing in our palms right now. They're flowing. They're just flowing at a different pace. The other amazing thing with stones and slowness is I think my Aunt Melita Stover said to me, these stones, every stone is looking, every person is looking for a stone their whole life, a spirit stone. But the stone has been looking for you its whole life too. But the problem is we're, on the 100-year scale, and stones are on the million-year scale. So imagining how long it had to wait to find you. So, and then we melt them and make them AI.
And then we melt them. Maybe that's why I was asking that slowness question, is why I was asking about that circularity, and maybe that was more of like a life cycle question. But I'm also wondering, we're talking about a kind of like ethical building, and timelines are a part of that, as you've just said. But I'm wondering also for you where wellness might come in. When we think ethical, sometimes it's just as ethical as we can be. Like, is ethical building, ethical making, the kind of ethical pursuits that you're speaking about, also talking about a healthy pursuit, or even in the idea of like maintaining the body in pursuit of dreaming, talking about that as an ethical process is also talking about that as a healthy process. And so before we kind of open up, I'm curious if you have or want to share more with us about a kind of wellness within your practice or scope of scholarship.
Yeah, so it's like I wanted to talk about this especially because it's my big challenge right now. Like I'm good at lots of stuff. Being good at stuff and doing intellectual processes and making art and talking. I'm good at those, but I'm really, really bad at slowness, and I'm really bad at structuring my life so I have time to dream and rest. Like I haven't figured it out. So if anyone has, hot tips, let me know. But it really bothers me that I'm supposed to be continuing models in academia and talk about ethics and create new tools. But at the same time, I'm supposed to model that this rapid laboring for my students and my community members, and I can't do right by my community members to bring them in to this process that eventually exhausts them to the point of not being able to do anything. So, I just want to bring that up as the challenge in these funding models, because 6 years is not long enough, and time scales for decision making need to be much longer. So.
Can I just ask one more question before we open it up? Along those lines, one of the things I'm teaching a grad course this semester on critical AI, and one of the things we talk about a lot, maybe is similar to what you were saying when you said, right now the discourse on AI really bores me, right? There's an affective fatigue to reading about how AI kind of replicates colonialism, racism, ableism, sexism, right? And which are all very, very true, but and environmental crisis, right? But there's also a dimension of heaviness to it, right? So we talk a lot about really orienting ourselves towards hope in the class as well, right? And I wonder, there's something deeply hopeful about all of your work, despite your engagement with these more critical perspectives. So if you could say a little bit about where that hope might come from, or...
Yeah, hope's an interesting word. I think that the reality is that I see my community members and I see what they do is they make new things. They're creators. They create. When I work with my colleagues like Alicia Wormsley, and we talk about, her community's tradition of like in Afrofuturism and quilt making, and I see, it's creation. Creation is what makes new knowledge. And if we want to make new good things, to me, it's quite simple. We take the frameworks in our communities that involve our values and our epistemologies and our ontologies, and we use those frameworks to continue to make new things. Our communities are full of, everybody's a genius in my community. These are geniuses. We don't need to prescribe to ontologies which lead to violence and oppression in order to make new things. And that's not to say that we're not going to use all the tools and be involved in all the conversations and do critique and be on panels with corporations we don't really want to talk to, but we really got to get our voice up. But that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying also, and more importantly, generating new knowledge, moving knowledge from the spirit world, from our ancestors into now, just like we've always done.
Now, should we open it up to any questions from the audience?
Just wave and I'll bring a mic to you.
Hi, I was curious. I noticed early on the symmetry in the patterns, and then you mentioned mirroring. Is that just for visual purposes, the mirroring?
That's a great question. I don't have I don't have a citational researched answer, but I have a really strong inkling that these flat patterns that we've been looking at, there's evidence, there's historical evidence that the designs unfold, and that to me, first of all, the designs really to me imply infinite L systems. They look a lot like they could be L systems to me, or like infinite unfolding. But I think that I know that they're 3D because I know the light cone, or the Capemni is kind of like a light cone, like a Minkowski's light cone, and that all these things are three-dimensional. You also hear, if you've ever read things like The Sixth Grandfather, that we're talking about spheres of knowledge and spheres of experience. And so I think all these things are three-dimensional, and I do think there's a really strong aspect of mirror world in Lakota religion. But I'm not an elder and I'm not an expert, but that's how I feel when I look at them. I feel like they're unfolding in all directions simultaneously.
Have you thought about working in VR?
Actually, I was just thinking about that they wants to help me model one of these unfolding. I'm not really into VR. I think the goggle bothers me, but I like 3D modeling.
Other questions? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kite. It was a great talk. Appreciate it so much. You said that you're trying to train your mind you're trying to train yourself to dream in symbols. How's that working for you? And is your work contributing to that, or are you building a computer in your dreams, or what's happening?
Not doing so good, but it's so funny because all I do is talk about dream techniques, but I'm just not great at them. When I really commit to them, they really do work. And now I have this like library of knowledge. I'm supposed to choose a dream. I'm supposed to design my own dream path for the Cosmology-scapes project with Alicia. And I just can't commit to anything because I feel like the whole project is me designing a dream path. But I think where I'm at right now is patience. And I think that I'm curious when I start working with this postdoctoral student fellow in getting when we get the EEG up and, I mean, it's already working, but getting it in community and making stuff with family members, I'm really curious, like what techniques we already do that get ourselves into dreaming states, different types of brainwave patterns, but even things as basic as singing together. If you've been in a choir or in a setting of group song, it's really different type of thinking. So that's one thing I'm really curious about, but I'm still really curious about the idea of performance. And if my brain is different, I know it is. I know there's like different brain signals that happen when you're performing music. And so, but I'm really curious in terms, it's a proto language. So, and music is also a language, we know when we're doing music reading, it's hard. You can't speak. I find it really hard to speak at the same time as playing violin. So I'm really curious about all the neuroscience stuff. And I think in that will unfold new ways that AI can collaborate with us. It probably won't be like in pretty flashy ways. It'll probably be in very mundane mathematical functions to like do some quick translation of, I'm acting similar to the other systems I made where I dream, I perceive, I dream, I perceive.
Right on. Thank you.
Any questions from this side of the room?
Hi. So I'm not sure how to word this question, but you mentioned something with the depth cycles of like with AI on the bottom and depth cycles. Do you think of your art as having some kind of an end, and like have you considered it for like where you want your art to end, especially the generative art, like in something in Touch Designer?
Yeah, beyond the of course there's the material question of like I buy a computer and then what do I do when it dies? I just had a laptop die, gotta figure that out. But on the kind of conceptual level, when I'm actually trying to talk about wellness, trying to design my lab in my studio right now to have cycles and to call them things. So like a 10-year cycle of kinship, a 10-year cycle of, I think the 30 years from now, I hope to be finishing a cycle focusing on humility. And, I'm trying to imagine that when I'm finishing my career, how I want to feel. What do I want to have my former students say about me? What do I want to have my family members say about me? How do I want to feel when it's coming to an end? And do I want to feel like I am beyond just the artwork? Because it's very easy to get caught up in like art making and artwork, and the art world is its own monster that kind of encourages that. Also encourages preservation of artworks and storing them forever. I've got 2 storage units for artwork, and is that right? I don't think so. But like when I want to see that the death cycle is built back into everything, because it's very clear when you look at native regalia that it was supposed to be a living being that goes back to the earth, and it's made like that on purpose. It's supposed to disintegrate, but instead they got dipped in formaldehyde and put in museums. And I think that is a logic I don't want to pursue. I really like working with rocks because of that, because you can put them back where they came from. It's not even that complicated. Anyway, that's kind of some thoughts. No solutions, but yeah.
I think we've maybe got time for one more question.
I liked your presentation. It was really nice. But my question was, when it comes to your work, how do you think your dreams have helped you the most? Like whether in terms of productivity or like with your emotions?
I think doing that exercise where I wrote them down every day. Well, first of all, my memory, my ability to remember them increased like a lot just by focusing on it. And then I think that, there's the basic psychological stuff that I'm able to take by writing them down and able to come back and look at them later and perform them, like with music. I'm able to take a different perspective on them, and then they unveil themselves slower to me. Because just because I thought it was about something when I had it, the last person who's an expert on my own psychology is me. Actually, like I have zero perspective. I'm living in this meat bag, and then I have to analyze what my brain's doing. Like it's hard, but I see that. So like when Becky Redbow showed me this beaded bag she made, and that she had to pray for the design, and it came to her in the dream, and then she made it. And then I asked her, well, what does it mean? And she was like, kind of like, it doesn't matter. I'll find out later. And that is slowness. And that is like allowing the creation to live before you analyze it, which is not what, coming out of things like MFAs and PhDs, you're supposed to analyze instantly. Analysis is the name of the game, but in dealing with still artwork, it might take a decade to figure out what was going on and kind of see it, or it might not be your job. The other really cool thing about beadwork and artwork from dreams is often it gets gifted, and so it becomes the other person's thing to play with and to gaze upon and to interpret slowly over the course of their life. And that's, I think, also clear in storytelling traditions from our communities, where you hear the story once and then it changes and it changes and it changes. Maybe not verbally, but meaning-wise. It means something else. It means something else. It means something else. So, yeah.
Thank you. And if our moderators have any closing questions, I think because we didn't.
Maybe you gave us a really beautiful rundown of one of the exercises, but it is, and you also just said, focusing is one of the meatiest part of maybe knowing ourselves and our dreams. But if you have any other ways we might be able to commune with the dream space that we are in, maybe that would be a really great way to close the space out.
Yeah, I would say that the one thing I'm thinking about, and this applies to AI as well, is that to pay attention when you create something, and to not, because creation is like the dream, becoming physically evident in on this world, and that like pay attention to the way the idea comes to you. Was it Archer Bachalis' lightning strike? Was it Clementine Bordeaux's offering and return? Was it Jackson Two Bears listening with no not trying to use the thing? Was it slow? Was it quick? And how did that new idea, doesn't have to be the greatest idea in the world. It could be a dream about finding butter in the cabinet, which I've had multiple times. How did it come to you? Was it quick? Was it slow? And then seeing, is that a framework by which you can create something new? Like, can I take that and supply it to some other act, like arranging a score that involves an AI tool? Like, we don't have to separate our brain and our dreams from other things. And yeah, I always like to remind people that in Lakota, the word for dream is the waking dream or the sleeping dream. So sleep is just another state of, perceiving things. So
thank you so much. So in the spirit of wanting to build community, we have snacks